Hi guys, it's Mrs. Gregerson, and we are now doing probably the hardest lesson of all of Chapter 10. It's Lesson 10.3, and it's called the surface area of prisms and cylinders. Now, when we talk about area, remember area is the process of counting the number of squares that are made by a figure. So I want to find the surface area of a three-dimensional shape, like this cylinder. Well, basically, it's just what you hear. It's the area of what's on the surface. So it's kind of like finding the area of the net, the two-dimensional piece that makes the solid one to go together. So when I work with these solids, I have the area of the two circles here and all what's called the lateral surface here. I want to know how many squares cover these. Or the same idea when you work here, like this with octagon prism, I want to know what is the area of every surface. So we're going to go through and we're going to actually talk about the different parts of these first so we can use those to our advantage to solve for area later. If you haven't looked yet, look over Chapter 7. Chapter 7 notes have all your formulas and a lot of times, not just formulas, but also stuff with special right triangles that you do need to remember. So first thing, you need to remember prisms and cylinders always have two congruent parallel bases. For a prism, they have to be polygons that are congruent and parallel, and for cylinders, obviously, they're going to be circles for the bases. Well, first of all, we have what's called a lateral face. A lateral face is not a base. So like here, the octagons would be considered our bases, all right, and then our lateral faces would be all of these rectangles. So that's going to be our lateral face. And in this case, there should be 3 for each one of these triangular prisms. All right. The edges of the base, remember the edges are where two faces come together. Those are called the base edges. I mean, two kind of simple, right? And that's just right here. What we have also is called a lateral edge. Now, a lateral edge is all the edges that are not base edges. So here we have base edges. They're always around the prism here. And you're going to have 6 for each one of those figures. But if you have the lateral edge, it's where the two lateral faces come together. Also, we actually classify the different types of prisms, okay? We have what's called a right prism. That is a prism whose all the lateral faces are rectangles, or you could also say the lateral edge is perpendicular to the base edges. Another way of saying this is that it's the one that stands straight up and down. This would be considered a right prism because every side is going to be a rectangle. But then we have the times when they lean a little bit, and those are called oblique prisms. An oblique one has at least one side that's like a parallelogram or a different shaped quadrilateral. Now, every cylinder or a prism has to have what's called an altitude. Now, remember, we had altitudes with parallelograms, triangles, and here's the definition. I like this one. We know it's going to be a perpendicular segment joining the planes of the two bases. So this would be an altitude for that prism. The height is just the length of the altitude. That's the same idea like when we had height and altitudes with triangles that we worked with before. But now remember, earlier we said what surface area? Well, I love the definition for this. The surface area is the total area of all the faces and curved surfaces of a three-dimensional figure. I want to know how many squares cover this. It's kind of like putting wrapping paper on it. Now, your surface area, we're going to abbreviate the SA. We also have what's called lateral area. Lateral area, LA, is the sum of all the areas of the lateral faces. So basically it'd be everything here, all these rectangles, except for the two octagon bases. So that's lateral area. So we're going to find surface area and lateral area of all of our three-dimensional shapes that we've been working with. All right, now we're going to do the next page, which will take us a little bit of time, but you guys will do a great job.